Hello, Garden Club friends. I wish I could be there with you today. The dates got mixed up for me and I'm not able to attend, but I had something prepared for you for a little horticultural moment. And Renee and I thought maybe I could videotape it and somehow she could show you. I was going to speak to you about just the benefits of gardening during this time. And then I was going to end it with something fun. So, here we are together again, but not really together. And so many things have changed for us. But one thing hasn't changed, and that's the benefit of gardening. Our Irving Garden and Arts Club was formed to foster the appreciation of beauty and nature, and those things are COVID-proof. But how are we enduring the uncertainty of this pandemic? Netflix, or deep breathing, or rearranging our furniture? Yes, but what about our outdoor spaces? We as humans need something to nurture, and we need to be nurtured, and gardening gives us both. Thankfully, our garden centers have remained open. We can go. The plants are there waiting for us. It's a wonderful time to be a home gardener because we're all at home. I went to Callaway's recently to buy my first round of annuals, and I brought them home, set them down, and looked across my yard. All my summer flowers were still happy. They were a little tall, but they weren't complaining. My head told me, hey, it's late October. It's time to change over to the fall flowers, but my heart didn't want to. I thought, well, I'll wait a few more weeks until these summer flowers are completely done. But I couldn't do it. The next day, I was involuntarily drawn out there to rip out those happy summer flowers and move them into the compost pile. It was hard. Gardening requires decision making. We have to get rid of what looks good but is not going to last and make room for what is ready to move in. You all know why gardening is beneficial. We're being outside, we're in the soil, we're working with our plants. It reduces our cortisol levels. Just the act of working with seeds or a plant and caring for it brings us out of ourselves and puts us in touch with nature. Putting our hands in the soil, the soil that we touch, the soil microbes there are known to release endorphins. Maybe that's one of the reasons gardeners are usually so happy. Plants are not judgmental. They ground us. Gardening doesn't require us to wear a mask. Planting gives us a sense of control, which helps when everything around us doesn't. And gardening is full of surprises, usually the good kind. In all this uncertainty, one thing is certain. Plants need tending, and we are the tenders. As you probably do every day, I go out and assess my garden. Is everything looking good? I water, I deadhead, I add amendments, I clean out old growth. I'm touching my plants and getting close. They are my therapy. They just sit there and grow, and I'm filled up. Looking into the garden from my house and seeing the colors of my plants and flowers ministers to me all day long. And we didn't even get into the topic of trees. Plants and trees are soothing. The act of gardening is soothing, and it brings people together just as it has brought us together today. So after that wonderful realization of how good gardening is, I thought we could use some humor. I found an online gardening conversation where women were sharing their most embarrassing gardening moments. They wrote of tripping over tools or over bricks or cobblestones, or of getting bees trapped up in their shirts and ripping their shirts off and running inside. One woman had that happen to her two times. But my first story of 3 for you is this. A woman wrote that she had just bought some small plants and was ready to plant them. She said the containers were really flimsy and the first plant was stuck in the pot. So I pushed the bottom of the plant up with my thumb and pulled it out with my other hand. Then I looked into the pot and screamed because there was a thumb in the pot. Then I realized it was my own thumb. I can see myself doing that very same thing. Okay, our second story. Can you relate to this? Another woman wrote, the embarrassing story that comes to mind is from last summer during rose planting season. I work full-time and spend time with kids on the weekends, so if I want to have dedicated time to planting, I take a day off work. I had been madly digging and planting all day, including some massive, muddy, mature roses. At my best, I'm not a pretty sight in the garden at planting time, with a grubby, overlarge t-shirt and my husband's discarded gray cotton trousers held up by a string and a prayer. I tend to look like a scruffy bag lady at these times and always end up wearing half of whatever I've been planting. By late afternoon, I was covered in mud, drenched along both pant legs, had alfalfa work deep into my hair, and could barely see through the muck on my face. I could no longer tell what I smelled like, but think alfalfa tea. Of course, at that moment, my husband showed up with some friends. He'd forgot to tell me he'd invited home for dinner. Not only did they look horror-stricken at this barely human creature lunging toward them, brandishing various sharp instruments, but they took one look at my hands and clearly thought, you mean those hands are going to prepare our food? Well, fortunately, they were spared that, and we ordered pizza, and a beer or two helped to ease that situation, not to mention a long hot shower. That's funny. Last but not least, my last story. Has this ever happened to you? One woman wrote, we used to have geese. One was a particularly mean, aggressive goose. She was so aggressive we thought she was a gander and we named her George. She went after everybody. I was unloading plants out of my trunk one foggy morning in a long house dress when I heard her mean little feet slapping on the driveway. I knew she was coming after me and whirled around to defend myself. When I whirled around, my skirt flew up and George ended up under my dress. If you've ever been bitten by a goose, you will understand my terror at the thought of being bitten on the inner thigh by George. I was dancing and screaming in my effort to escape. In the middle of all the dancing and screaming, something caught my eye, and it was the meter reader driving down the driveway with his headlights on. I felt like I was on stage under the spotlights. I was never able to look that meter reader in the eye after that. Of course, my husband came flying out of the house to see what was going on and witnessed the whole thing, and it's a story he loves to tell. She didn't bite me, but it wasn't for lack of trying. Well, I told my husband I had admitted online to the George attack, and he asked me if I'd fessed up to the most embarrassing part, the real reason I couldn't look the meter reader in the eye. And he said I had to tell the whole story because it wasn't as funny without it. Okay, I had these huge curlers in my hair, the kind us curly-haired women used to straighten our hair. I had an avocado face mask on, think green. And my dress had a very low scoop neckline. When the dancing and screaming and hopping around commenced, certain parts of my anatomy were getting exposed. So there it is. I was dancing around in all my glory with orange goose legs and a white tail sticking out from under my dress. And that's the rest of the story. I'm sure you're wondering why any sane person would be out in this getup. It was because I had forgotten to unload the plants the day before, and they'd been in the trunk all that time. So when I remembered them, I went flying out of the house just as I was. needless to say, that's the last time I was insane enough to do that. All right, new plants needing to be unloaded. I completely understand how she flew out there in her womanly glory to rescue them. That's all I've got for today. In the future, Lynn and I are considering continuing on with our Great Gardens of the World series that we had started earlier. So stay tuned. Happy gardening.